Hello and welcome back from spring break. And we move on to Chapter 30. The advent of limited liability companies in the system of jurisprudence reflects a synthesis of both something new and something old. Various forms of limited liability companies have been used in other parts of the world for many years. Even in the United States, a variation of the LLC concept was pioneered right here in Pennsylvania with the 1874 law authorizing the Limited Partnership Association, which was extensively used for a time. Now, this form of business organization bears a striking resemblance to the limited liability firm currently today used in Europe and Latin America. Now, Germany gets credit for development of the modern LLC with its passage in 1892 of the Gesellschaft mit beschränkter Haftung, GmbH statute. My German is terrible. In any case, a GmbH is what you will see commonly for what essentially is an LLC in German. The question arises of what had kept the United States jurisprudence from adopting this form of business for so many years. And it's one simple little four-letter word, taxes. Okay, five-letter word, taxes. More specifically, the fear of double taxation on corporations held back the implementation of limited liability companies. Traditional interpretations of state law allowing for limited liability focused on corporate laws. As such, the possibility of legitimate tax structure avoidance was severely limited to the rules and regulations covering what are now known as sub-S corporations. Subchapter S was first added to the Internal Revenue Code back in 1958 and has gone through a number of revisions and updates ever since. The essence of these provisions has been to allow a corporation to avoid double taxation only under very limited constraints outlined in the Internal Revenue Code. Well, you and I don't like to pay more than we have to in taxes, and neither do business operations. And if you can avoid double taxation, well, so much the better. With increasing pressure to attract more overseas capital and investment into the United States, a number of states decided to create new forms of business entities. They would not only be familiar to overseas investors who were already comfortable with the limited liability company, but also gain the Internal Revenue Service approval for being taxed like a partnership and still provide limited liability to all participants in the entity. That is the huge advantage of an LLC. In 1977, Wyoming was the first to enact legislation establishing the modern era of LLC laws in the United States. After the IRS published a ruling in favor of the Wyoming law in 1988, 11 years later, it only took about 10 years for all 50 states to have approved similar bills. Now, considering all the possible permutations that have evolved since the opening foray into limited liability company laws, the demand for a uniform statute was not unexpected. And this chapter focuses on that. It's the main element of the Uniform Limited Liability Company Act and revisions, as promulgated by the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws. Initially, each state passed their own variation of the LLC laws. The Uniform Limited Liability Company Act seeks to get states to better align their laws with other states and make it easier for businesses to work on an intrastate basis. Now, the Act, in effect, seeks to marry the best elements of agency, partnership, and corporate law into a format that allows for uniformity and predictability on these issues throughout the United States. Now, as with any major turn in the process of legal evolution, we're witnessing a work in progress, and the final product is far from complete, but it surely has come a long way in a generation. And the LLC really is in many ways a creature of the 21st century. We're seeing many businesses now are going this route that otherwise would have chosen partnerships or corporation status in years past. Now, as seen in earlier chapters, business entity choices are strategic decisions based on a number of factors. The elements include choosing the best options for potential capital investment and financial growth, and financing that growth, protection from personal liability. In this day and age, that's extraordinarily important, and also tax planning. No one entity format is ideal for all objectives. However, recent trends have led to the use of the limited liability company format as the best vehicle for providing a best of both worlds, that is, a single layered conduit for taxation of proprietorships and partnerships with the limited personal liability accorded to shareholders of a corporation. That, in a nutshell, is the beauty of the LLC concept, and why it is becoming, in many regards, the default standard when businesses are looking to establish themselves. All right, so. Our discussion topic this week will focus on the ethics case on page 30.7. That's the case 30.7. It's on page 546, and it centers on the liability of members of an LLC. It's an interesting case, and it does go to the notion of, is it ethical to use the construction of an LLC or a corporation to shelter oneself from personal liability? And your IRAC writing assignment is from the critical thinking case 30.1. That's on the previous page. It's Page versus Roscoe, and it was decided in the North Carolina Appeals Court. I would like your IRAC case brief to also include your thoughts on whether Bone should have been able to recover legal fees from the people who sued him in the case. The assignment is due Sunday night, April 3rd, as is the online forum discussion. And then next week, we'll be covering Chapter 31, Franchise and Special Forms of Business. So we're back to it. We're in the home stretch, and we'll talk to you next week.